in order to reach the truth, it is necessary at some point in one's life to rid oneself of all the opinions one has ever received and to rebuild one's entire system of knowledge from the very foundation. There's a little girl here tonight. Camille, where's Camille? 6 years old or so, 7 years old. I was swimming with her a little while ago, and she showed me her teeth. She said, I lost 2 of my teeth. And look, there's 2 new teeth coming underneath it, and she was all excited about that. And I said to her mom and my daughter Summer, who was here, just imagine that in that tiny little infinitesimally small little speck that built into that was what she's going through right now. What is there to do? There's nothing for us to, we can't make a change. In that tiny little invisible speck, everything that you needed for this physical journey was handed for you. And you don't believe in miracles? In the great Tao, many of you know I lived the Tao for a year. The year I turned 65 and wrote a book on it. A book that I always tell people, carry it with you wherever you go. Some call it the wisest book ever written. And I lived the principles of that little book. And I encourage people to just stick it in your new purse. Because I often have quoted Lao Tzu, and he has often said, the Tao, God, divine mind, the Tao does nothing. And it leaves nothing undone. It's all perfect. So I say to him over the summer over in Maui, I said, Sans, come on, do something. You got to do it. Let's go. We got to do something. He looked up and he said, I do nothing. And I leave nothing undone. So this stuff can come back at you. It's his favorite line now. He's a Taoist philosopher. So the great Saint Swami Muktananda was asked the question, what is real? And his response is really worth you hearing. And something for you to really think about, because the strange place that I think it's weird, it's just so magical, but it's still, it's hard for us to wrap our arms around this idea that all things are possible. This awareness that about what is real. And Muktananda said, that is real, which never changes. So what part of your physical life meets that definition? We are all in these bodies that are changing every second. Therefore, by that definition, they're not real. So you go back and look at how many bodies you've been in since you showed up here. You were in a body about this big that weighed somewhere between 5 and 10 pounds, and that was you. And you were in a little toddler body about this tall. And you certainly, if someone said, is that you, you would have said, yeah, that's me. And then you were in a 13 or 12-year-old body, which is one of these. I have 6 daughters, and they have a stance, you know, when they're about 13, and they go like this, and their leg goes up and down, and they roll their eyes and look at you like you ought to try to get a life someplace. You were in one of those bodies, teenage body, and you thought that was real. That's when you get the great learnings. One of my daughters, Serena, said to me one time when I raised my voice, and asked her to hurry up and get moving. Come on. She looked at, I wonder what all those people would think of Mr. Positive if they could see him here this morning. She turned to her sister and said, would you buy a book from someone who yells at his 11-year-old daughter? I sneak out of the room and try to... Best line I ever heard from any of my children ever, and I followed them around with a pad of paper to give me material, was from my daughter Summer. When she was 13 and her sister was 11, sitting at the breakfast table, and all of a sudden about 6:30 in the morning, and Summer looked at Serena and said, well, if you didn't have any feet, would you wear shoes? Serena at that time, and it hasn't gone away, could hardly stand anybody talking to her at 6 o'clock in the morning, and said, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard you say. Don't even talk to me. Why are you, just don't even talk to me. Close your mouth. Why are you talking to me? That's so stupid. What if I didn't have any feet? Would I wear shoes? Of course not. Summer looked at her and said, don't get mad at me. I just wonder why you're wearing that bra. That's, so, you were in one of those bodies. I was in a 20-year-old body, and I saw a picture of it on the PBS show, and I was doing a little bit of this, and the pictures of me at various stages of my life were going by, and the film was, the camera was looking at this picture, and it stopped on a picture of me when I was about 20 years old, and I'm 70, when that was 51 years ago, and there's not one cell of that body left on this planet. I really thought it was real. And when you were in your 20-year-old body, you thought it was real, didn't you? I mean, it's just like, you look at it, you say, of course it's real, and now you look back at it and you say, if it was real, where is it? And where did it go? Emily Dickinson, another great poet, one of my very favorite poets from Massachusetts, would give talks back in the 19th century, and she would pick up a handful of dirt, and she would say, just let this in. This quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies and lads and girls, was laughter and ability and sighing and frocks and curls. This passive place, a summer's nimble mansion where bloom and bees fulfilled their oriental circuit, then ceased, like these. That's who you are, if you believe that you're your body. Just quiet dust that's going to fulfill its circuit and cease. And we all know that we're something much more than that. But we haven't been raised to believe that. So my talk tonight is really about understanding there is a component of us that is beyond the physical, beyond the physical, metaphysical, beyond form, over, past, higher than form, transformed. And this part of who we are has infinite possibilities. and can do anything, can heal anything, can manifest anything, can attract into our lives the right people, and you get a sense after a while that that this invisibleness that is who we are is, as you begin to elevate your awareness and move to a higher level, and this is basically the essence of it. It's that we were all conceived and born into a world and a culture in which we were raised to be ordinary. And ordinary isn't so bad. I'm not here to put down ordinary and average and fitting in and all the things that ordinary comprises. It's just not what I want for me. And I got the mic tonight. So, and ordinary really means, it means fitting in. It means getting along. It means becoming a good citizen. It means filling out the forms. It means paying your taxes. It means having your children and providing for them and taking care of them and going to work, going to school and getting good grades and graduating and your family and doing all of this, these ordinary things, and then getting to the later stages in your life where you become a grandparent, and then you live your life through your grandchildren, and then you die. And this isn't an indictment of that. It's for me an awareness that if I put my hands here about at my waist, I am speaking about ordinary consciousness. And where I would like to take you tonight, where I have been taken in my life, particularly in the last year or so, and particularly in the last decade or so, is to a place that I call extraordinary awareness. And extraordinary awareness is, it encompasses all of ordinary. So that you're listening to an ordinary man. I fill out the forms, or I get somebody to do it for me, more like it. And I pay my taxes, and I've provided for all of my children. And I went to school and saw that they went to school and was there for them as much as I could be, and did all of the things that we would say constitute ordinary. But extraordinary doesn't stop here. See, this is where it stops for so many people. And they go through their life with this, remember the Barbra Streisand song? Is that all there is? And there's this sense that there's more. There's a calling. There's something in me that transcends the physical, that transcends ordinary. And this something that wants to move us to this extraordinary level out here is beyond the ego. Everything I've spoken about here is the ego. It's the striving for, it's an identification and a belief in my identity as a physical being, and believing in what my physical self tells me is my reality, and evaluating it on the basis of what I can see and touch and feel and smell and hear, so that it's my senses, my sensory self is here. But this up here, between ordinary and extraordinary, where I believe anyone can go at any time. Here we are what E.E. Cummings, another favorite poet, he said, to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you just like everybody else means to fight the greatest battle there is to fight and never stop fighting. This is how the poets think. It's about going beyond average. It's about going beyond ordinary. It's about recognizing your own divinity. It's about understanding that there's something inside of you that is calling you. It's your spirit, it's your soul. And your soul, your spirit, is here in the distance between here and here. And your soul wants something very, very different than your physical body ego apparatus wants. It's not interested in fitting in. It doesn't care whether you're right. It doesn't care whether people like you. It doesn't care about whether you're a good citizen or not. I wrote these words out the other night. Let me share them with you. It says, I said, the ideal, because I'm going to write about this, the ideal of the soul, the thing that it asks for, is neither knowledge, nor light, nor happiness. The ideal of the soul is space. The ideal of the soul is immensity. The one thing it needs is to be free to expand, to reach out, to embrace the infinite. Yeah, the ideal of the soul is infinity. It is it is miserable when it is circumscribed and restricted. The soul is not finite. What is finite? Finite means it has a beginning and it has an end, doesn't it? So that's it. It stops here and it's finite. The opposite of finite is infinite, infinite. And what is infinite? What does it mean when something is infinite? It means that it is always expanding, right? It doesn't stop any place. It is always growing. It's like the universe. It's just infinite. What do you think's at the end of the universe? Just try to imagine a finite universe. And we come up with, well, what would be at the end of it? And what we think is at the end of it is what? What, is there a wall? And if there's a wall at the end of the universe, the poet would ask, what's on the other side? And where does that end? So there's getting in touch with this infinite part of ourselves is really the part of us that says, there was a song that was popular when my mother was a young woman. It was called Don't Fence Me In. Oh, give me land, lots of land, and the starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Remember that song? All the old folks singing. My daughter's looking at me, what is he going to do now? He's going to embarrass me. We don't want to be fenced in. Now, before I had any children, I had 8 theories about how to raise children. I even wrote about them. Now we have 8 children. I have no theories. But the one thing I know about raising children is this, that nobody likes being told what to do. Right, Sage? I was telling the story of you, honey, on Mother's Day one year at a restaurant where we were all there, my mother, Marcy's mom and dad, and we were all there. And Sage is, in a lot of ways, like me, what I call I tell this story at every talk, so I might as well hear it. That's the scurvy elephant. When I was in a foster home back in Mount Clemens, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I came home from school, And Mrs. Scarf, who ran this home, had this home that a bunch of us lived. And I came home and I asked her, what's a scurvy elephant? And she said, a what? And she said, a scurvy elephant. I said, and she said, well, where did you hear that? I said, well, I heard Mrs. Poole, who was my third grade teacher, talking to the principal, and she said that Wayne Dyer was in her classroom and that he was a scurvy elephant. So she got on the phone, called the principal, and the principal said, oh, no. And she said, that's Wayne. He gets everything mixed up. She didn't say that he was a scurvy elephant in her classroom. She said that he was a disturbing element in her classroom. And I always loved to say that. So a scurvy elephant is, and my teacher, Abraham Maslow, used to always say to us, the number one marker of self-actualizing people is their independence of the good opinion of other people. They're just not interested in being told what to do. I watched on my iPad, which I just got, and it had a commencement address by Steve Jobs at Stanford University. It was 15-minute, and I just sat there, and before I meditated, I listened to what he had to say. This immensely scurvy elephant, who really, just passed away a few weeks ago, and many of his biographers now saying that he's up there with Thomas Edison and Benjamin Franklin and Alexander Graham Bell, people like that. He really changed who we are as a people and how we communicate with each other. And his advice to the whole graduating class at Stanford was, don't live somebody else's dharma. Don't listen to that inner calling. And whatever it calls you to do, listen to it. And don't pay attention to anybody telling you what's possible or what's not possible, or whatever. Just fight for it. Sage was at Mother's Day, and I don't even remember what it was that she wanted to wear or didn't want to wear, but it had something to do with dresses and skirts and slacks. And I remember that Mother's Day walking in the parking lot with Sage for 45 minutes or so, talking to her about, I know exactly how you feel and how you think. I said, but there's a lot of people who think that you should maybe wear something nice. It's Mother's Day and it's a restaurant. I said, but you don't have to go back in there. We'll go home and get something afterwards if you want. And she just gave me that, I don't want to do this, and why should I be told what to wear? And I understood that. I understood it very strong. And she's still doing that. But it also serves people very, very well. This idea that I'm going to listen to that voice, and we all have it. And when we have this voice, and this voice has passion associated with it, that is, when you feel a strong passion towards what it is that you want to become, what you want to create, the kind of person that you intend to be, when you have that within you, it doesn't make any difference whether anybody else understands it or gets along with it. You don't even try to talk to anybody else about it. You just listen to it, and you become a disturbing element. You become a scurvy elephant in the world. And it's the only way you'll ever feel fulfilled. You won't get it by fitting in. So in order to, you have to listen to your soul. And your soul is that invisibleness. And your soul is not finite. Therefore, everything up to here is finite. Everything that I spoke about, filling out the forms, fitting in, being a good citizen, doing all the right things, all these things which I applaud, which are all fine, but they only take you, you end up living a half-lived life. Herman Melville. I spoke about him this morning when I spoke to the writers group here. I mean, his writing was so profound and so beautiful, and he had this one line from Moby Dick, which is really not the story about a man chasing a whale. It's a story of a person who has an obsession, and that whale is a symbol of I must achieve it. I read a really great book this summer. Every one of my kids have read it. It's called Unbroken by Laura Hillerbrand. And I recommend that you read it, and wherever this is going around the world, get a copy of it. It's the story of Louis Zamperini, who survived on a raft across the ocean and was taken to a Japanese prisoner of war camp, and on and on and on, and survived against all odds. And then at the end was able to go back and forgive. I mean, it's just a powerful, beautiful, spiritual experience. And Ahab was pursuing his own inner voice that just couldn't be stilled. And this is how Melville spoke, because I live on an island in the middle of the Pacific, Maui, where I invite you to come in January to listen to the whales. Go on a whale watch with me, and if you like what I'm speaking about here tonight, we do 2 or 3 days on it in January. Here's Melville. He said, "For as this appalling ocean surrounds the verdant land, so in the soul of man lies one insular Tahiti, full of peace and joy, but encompassed by all of the horrors of the half-lived life. The half-lived life is the life that gets you to ordinary, filling out the forms, and then stopping. The self-actualized life starts at ordinary and listens to its soul, which you can't find, but you know is there. And there are some that doubt that it's there. I had a friend who's a neurosurgeon over in Maui, and he was saying, you know, you talk about this soul thing a lot. He said, I've poked around in a lot of human brains, and I've never seen a soul or anything resembling a soul. And I asked him, I said, Chuck, I said, while you're in there poking around, have you ever seen a thought? Well, no, of course not. I said, do you think there are thoughts? That such a thing as a thought exists? You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't. The fact is that virtually everything that exists is metaphysical, beyond the physical. It's very limited, our physical world, and it's not even real by Muktananda standards, because it's always changing. The body that you came into this room with will be a different, you'll leave in a different body. There's something called you that just keeps occupying more and more and more new bodies until ultimately it just sheds it all together. The great Irish poet William Butler Yeats said, an aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick. What an image. Unless soul claps its hands and sings, and louder sings, for every tatter in its mortal dress. We're just tattered coats on a stick, unless we have a soul. And when we have a soul, the soul says, don't fence me in. The soul says, don't tell me what to be. Don't tell me what I can't do. Don't you dare impose upon me who you are and what you think I should be. That's your soul. And all of you have this, because this body of yours is just an illusion. It's just a very temporary parenthesis in eternity, isn't it? And you know that you're going to leave it. And all the evidence is there, and you just keep looking at it. You try to pretend that it's not there, and so you color the gray, and you lift them up, and you shift it around, and you put on a girdle, and you do all of the, I don't know, you do all of the stuff to pretend that it's, and you're not doing a damn thing in this world. You're just being done. You're just being done. But what you're being done by is the higher self. So what I would like to offer you here is a program, if you will, it's sort of a preview. I've been reading and studying and lecturing all over the place for the last year or two. And for some reason, I've been given a big voice and a big audience. For some reason, I'm allowed to go on public television and present in prime time 3- and 4-hour specials on the Tao Te Ching, or on the power of intention, or on changing your life, living from a spiritual place. And it must be because I have had this wonderful opportunity handed to me that I've been getting exposed to more and more and more about the miraculous power that comes to us when we start our life from ordinary and just leave that part of it to be taken care of and move into this extraordinary place, this place that all the great writers speak about, where we transcend this ego of ours that believes that who we are is so important, and believes that who we are is what we own, and who believes that what we are is in competition with others and has to defeat others and has to win and has to be better than. I love the poets. I feel very poetic tonight. A great Indian poet named Rabindranath Tagore won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1927 with a collection of poetry called Gitanjali. And in there, he writes about this ego of ours. He says, I went out alone on my way to my tryst. But who is this me in the dark? I step aside to avoid his presence, but I escape him not. He makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger. He adds his loud voice to every word I utter. He is my own little self, my Lord. He knows no shame. But I, the invisible me, I am ashamed to come to thy door in his company. That's the ego. The part of us that makes the dust rise from the earth with our swagger, who's always adding his loud voice. But inside there's this being that says, who I am is so much more than that, so much more divine. And in order to get to the path of moving towards extraordinary, and the fact is that even though many people will attend to talk like this, and many people will buy the books and study it and look at it, the percentage of people who are willing to leave ordinary behind is very, very small. Honestly, it's only a handful of people in this room, even though the intentions are good. the book that I'm reading now, I came across a quote. I think I'm going to read it, if I have it here. Here it is. It was by a French philosopher, mathematician. Some of you studied him when you took a philosophy class. His name was René Descartes. He's the one who said, "I think, therefore I am." I don't like to question these guys. I used to teach them at the university, but I think he had it backwards. I really believe it should be, "I am, therefore I think." Well, that's just my opinion. I'll talk about it later. And Descartes said, in order to reach the truth, it is necessary at some point in one's life to rid oneself of all the opinions one has ever received and to rebuild one's entire system of knowledge from the very foundation. And I think I've done that recently. Just tossed out. I think this diagnosis of leukemia 2 years ago really helped me to do that. And to just say, I'm starting over. I'm going here. And I've been doing it in some ways. Many of people think I've done it my whole life, but honestly I haven't. I've wallowed around in that ego a lot in my life. And so in order to do this thing, you have to recognize that it fundamentally involves changing your concept of yourself. And changing your concept of yourself really means understanding what is your concept of yourself. Like, who are you? What is your concept of yourself? Your concept of yourself is everything that you believe to be true about yourself and what's possible for you and anyone else. And it really means changing most of that, because you have been raised to be ordinary. You've been raised to believe in your limits and how far you can go. And you've been have this imposed upon you by your well-meaning parents and grandparents and culture and religion and business and education. The systems that you have been immersed into have basically told you, get here. This is not for you. And it might not have even been done, and sometimes they might have even said, oh, you can do anything. And then we'll start to tell you all of the reasons, all of the exceptions to that, that I'm imposing on you. Like, you got to get dressed in a certain way for Mother's Day. And you've got to fit in, and you've got to do this, and it's by God, it's like the soul has no finiteness to it. It's infinite, so it means it just wants to keep expanding.